Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Caring Well. Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well, a Middleton Pediatrics podcast where we have conversations to help you care well for your child. Today, I sit down with Christine May, someone I've worked with for 15 years, one of our original team members. She and I will share insights that we've gathered over the last 15 years, and hopefully you'll be able to take some of that as you look ahead and care for your child in the years to come. So let's go to that conversation. Christine.
Hi.
Welcome back to
Thank you.
Caring Well 2.0. You were part of the original, that's maybe the ongoing idea here is you're part of the original, which is why we're going to gather and talk here tonight, but you're part of a podcast that we did 5 years ago.
Is that how long we broke for?
It was on, I think it was another, which we'll get into COVID. It was another thing that COVID sort of gobbled up.
Yeah, we started
and took away.
around then and we had some downtime and then rapidly got busy and
consumed
shifted.
by COVID. So thanks for coming back on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
As probably all of our listeners do not know, we are just now celebrating 15 years as a practice. And so thought it'd be fun for you and I to sort of reflect on the last 15 years as it relates to pediatrics, our practice, how we've evolved, how pediatrics has evolved, parenting evolved. So don't know exactly where the discussion will go, but it'll be fun. I do think as much as everybody knows you, I don't know that everybody knows your professional life prior to joining us.
Yeah.
So some quick high level, what were you doing professionally before you joined us 2011?
Original degrees in West Virginia, both my RN and MSN, my bachelor and master's degrees in West Virginia. Worked at the WVU Children's Hospital there in pediatric intensive care, really sick kids, and got burnt out incredibly quickly. At the time, I kind of jokingly said, I need sore throats, ear infections, kids who grow up and get better. And then I kind of shifted to that and obsessively love that part. It really has become everything I love about primary care. And so graduated and moved down to Lakeland for a year, trying to get a job out of school, and kind of knew within a year that I was going to end up in Tampa or Orlando, that it was a good starting spot, but didn't see myself there. And so Orlando won. Came this direction, worked in town at another primary care office for several years until our paths crossed. And crazy enough, this year is 20 years as a nurse practitioner.
Wow. And you're, again, I think most people don't know, you're also a faculty member now.
That's correct. Teaching at UCF College of Nursing, almost exclusively at the RN level.
All right. So maybe as a way to kick us off, thinking about the last 15 years, us as a practice, maybe actually share, you alluded to it right there, how your personal life has changed, because a lot over these 15 years, and that'll give us a little bit of where you are staged personally.
Absolutely.
And then we'll kind of segue that into the practice.
2011, I'm pregnant with my first child. Nabila and I had been married for just about 2 years at that point. And so it's really fun. I talk about it with other staff here in our newsletter, kind of writing about that role of my parenting journey mirrors our office so specifically, and can picture the times we were prepping and opening and already planning for Amelia, who goes by Mia, but with her friends know her as Amelia, what things were going to be like with her, and then kind of watching her grow as the practice grows. And then in 2012, had Olivia and have met capacity. I know a lot of our staff members have multiple children, a little bit bigger families, but we knew we were done at that. And they are now 13 and almost 15. And so have kind of gone through the toddler tantrums and the sleep issues and starting school and navigating school during COVID, and kind of a lot of the same things our families have dealt with along the way.
All right. So when you think about the 15 years and what has changed, and in any particular order, because we're not going to try to go chronological, what comes to mind? What are some things that come to mind when you reflect on these 15 years?
I think sitting here in the office, the physical space is a big part of it, because we can track that too, kind of as we've grown in number of providers, we've grown in rooms. And so initially, the different iterations of this floor that have existed, including the leopard carpet and the flooring underwater, which I'm sure we'll cover and get to at some point. Thinking of the way this building looked initially and the things that were different, like the cut wall of the nurses' station and that central meeting spot and the candy wall that everyone loves. But then having the new rooms that now we need the space and have grown out of the few rooms we had initially. The cube that was my home for a little bit that sat here. And even just the evolution of the kids on the walls as we've changed them, added new staff kid photos, and see kind of how our team has grown and the people have changed and how it reflects in the physical space.
When I think about the 15 years, one of the first things that come to mind is this nimble and adaptability.
Yeah.
And how that was both necessary and then also served us so well during a few times where it became an essential survival skill.
15 years, looking backwards, what are you most proud of?
I think this growing team and presence in this community, staying true to what you believe good pediatrics to be and finding people that come alongside and say, yes, me too. And then finding families that walk through the doors and say, that's exactly what I'm looking for, type of thing. We say all the time, we're not trying to be everybody's pediatrician, but I feel like we've stayed true to what we think we were called to be and do. And there have been families that have said, thank you, that's what we're looking for,
And without marketing, outside of word of mouth, our
Right.
families connecting their friends and the people who recognize other people once they're in the waiting room, or that this really is a community. The ability to come here and make these relationships with us has been so nice to see happen naturally. We haven't been seeking them out or finding the families outside of just personal referral,
Yeah.
which is great.
The idea that you could try to be faithful to what you think is good medicine and then the rest will take care of itself. I'm grateful. I don't know if grateful or proud, but definitely grateful for that.
Yeah. How was your parenting journey? If you could picture 2011, that
Yep.
was, I feel like I still remember our first days open. You had a 3 to 13-year-old.
Right.
Is that roughly the right time frame?
That's right. Yeah. Because now we're 28 to 18. That's right.
And so how does that look in your day-to-day differences? Because the office is certainly day-to-day different, but so's your house.
Yeah. It's, dramatically different. With 3 kids out of college, our last one about to leave for college. I think one of the things that's been, I would say, so fun and relatable about this practice, it was an all hands on deck family journey. Our kids being involved and feeling some of the angst and the excitement. If you think of the last 15 years, this is kind of crazy to think about. Winnie Palmer had only been open a couple years, I think. Nemours Hospital was just opening, maybe opened right after we did, actually. The Children's Hospital, even though they had a presence in town before that. Advent's Children's Hospital has taken off so much and added so many specialists in these 15 years. Orlando's, whatever it is, 40% growth and type of thing. And prior to us opening, almost all local pediatricians were independently owned offices. And now almost none.
Yeah,
There's
we're kind of one of the few
There's a few
holdouts in
right.
that.
Patients experience this, families experience this, that the landscape of medicine has changed and it's become much more consolidated. And that's not unique to medicine. That's true about banks and everything else. But we're pretty fiercely committed to sort of our independence. And at the same time, our patients have benefited so much from these 3 systems.
Yeah.
From Orlando Health, Advent, and Nemours. And but that's been a pretty dramatic growth over the last 15 years.
You go 15 years prior to that, not saying you were in practice for all 15 of those, but some prior to. Were you doing hospital visits and rounding at the start of your career?
Yeah. So we were going and doing, so seeing the patients who were inpatients, seeing the newborns that were born. We were not at that point doing ER. So that, I mean, if you go further back, right? I mean, you're seeing your patients when they show up at the ER, and then deliveries like C-sections and stuff like that. And so that was true for me, like residency, but not when I joined private practice, but we were seeing our patients in the hospital. And then the advent of, or the development of hospitalists. And so then we kind of quickly were focusing more on being in the office. One of the things we will say is that we want all of our patients' care to happen in the context of a relationship, primarily a relationship with your primary pediatric office. But then if there need to be specialists, and there often will, we want that to be an extension of a relationship we have with them. So in the midst of a system that is feeling larger and consolidated, and therefore the relationships can feel more fragmented, trying to be the proxy or the vicarious relationship on their behalf. And so that's,
and staying
definitely
independent has allowed us to do that in incredible ways, that we can utilize great specialists in each system, sometimes just out of who has availability, but sometimes out of great relationships we have with their staff or with the physician themselves, and letting that benefit the families who we know this is where I would take my child if I were going in for this procedure or this specialty. I'd go here too. And I think that carries a lot of weight with our families to be able to say that. Yeah. And there's something scary about navigating a system that's constantly changing. Not only is it complex and difficult and have all these barriers with payment and access, but just trying to figure out what the best course next step would be, and then adding to that is for your child. Those anxieties of families, when we can alleviate that just by helping call ahead for an ER visit or direct them directly where to go, I feel like is not something that should be exclusive to us, but we do lean heavily into and want to make sure it happens.
Yeah, I was going to ask you for specific examples, because the idea that what we communicate to families, that we're committing to own the journey with you. And that's not just when you walk in the door until you leave the door, it's the whole journey.
Yeah.
So you mentioned calling ahead to places.
Yeah, I think another one that may be behind the scenes and families don't realize is our after hours on-call protocols, that we have a system where a company does have staffed RNs answering phone calls, helping with some of that. But our own protocols are, if they're sending them on somewhere, we want to be notified, that we want to help make that decision, make sure we agree with it, that the steps are necessary to move on that night, urgent care, ER, otherwise, or if we'll help guide them through what can get them till morning until we can bring them here, and that we have kind of a dedicated role in that instead of just a hands off once we shut shop for the day.
Do you feel like if you could go back and see a day in the life of Christine in 2011 and then a day in the life 2026, any big ideas you think that come to mind that are dramatically different?
From 2011 volume, I think that's probably the biggest. Just we had this nice slow start, maybe not as slow as we thought it would be. We took off pretty quickly, but getting to grow and figure things out at the pace we were able to in the beginning gives me a lot of comfort in how things go on a busy day. Probably the other biggest difference is I do virtual visits 1 day a week, and that is notably different, working from home and seeing families in their own spaces. My spot has, a plant and a window and pictures behind me. So they're visiting me in my home office, and I'm seeing kids playing with their own toys, or families sitting on their couch in the living room, or parents working, trying to make the best of complicated illness isn't falling on a convenient time. And getting to have that connection in that setting and still offer care, because they're not new to us at that point. These are our existing patients. We have hopefully great relationships with, or at least establish some trust where we can guide them through things from a distance, is pretty remarkable.
The telehealth, the video visits, that was a COVID thing.
Yeah.
That sort of born out of necessity. What what even everybody outside of medicine experienced with the explosion of Zoom, medicine experienced with increased utilization of telehealth. And it was so overdue.
Yeah.
And COVID thrust it into our lives in such a necessary way, and it's stuck.
I thought there would be some of it continuing. I don't think I realized how vital of a role it would play or how much I enjoy doing that piece of it, because I thought it was filling a need, but not necessarily going to be sought out. And the ease of some of our visits, rashes with good quality photos, technology improving and letting patients upload pictures that make the care not just convenient, but still great, which is some of the beginning as stuff was changing. There were lots of worries on my part, or maybe our part, that the care wouldn't be great in that format. We would be giving something up for it. And I don't feel like that is true now.
What's been the evolution of our efforts in trying to be consistent with the care we give across the team?
Yeah, and sometimes that may not be as clear to families as it sounds to us, because consistent care may sound similar to great care. But I do think the important distinction there is that while you may get different personalities or slight different styles in delivery, our goal is you don't walk out with an entirely different treatment plan or medical side of things just because you saw someone different. And so I think the consistency has been, how do we make sure we're using evidence-based information to make clinical decisions that are supported by things that are out there? And that falls a lot on us to stay up to date on lots of reading, lots of talking together, coming up with plans. In the beginning, I feel like you led a lot of our initial clinical discussions. And it was actually in our 10-year review podcast I listened to recently that it was a team meeting at that point when we had Lisa and Kelly up front, Ginger and Ebony at the desk, Liz as our office manager, and the two of us. They would sit in on those.
Right. We would have to put a fine point on that. We would have a discussion about strep throat.
Yes.
And every single member of the team, which was 6 or 7 people,
Yep.
would be listening. And some of the administrative people like, oh, really? I never,
Yeah. And now the size of us makes that difficult. And with the number of voices chiming in, which is great for lots of reasons, it can be hard to keep that concise and make it through. And so as we moved on from that, there were lots of shared articles or shared books, more independent reading. I can't put a finger on when we started using Slack communication instead of just emails and texting to help streamline and search and keep track of all of that stuff. But that was a huge change for me too, knowing to go one specific place to search for things we were sharing with each other. And then more recently into kind of the official, what's been dubbed coffee chats, because I'm not a morning person and need coffee, even though we've moved them to lunchtime, keeping that name. And that's been a really fun, more coordinated effort to pick a topic, teach some of the interns, refresh all of our minds on what we learned in school, and then update what latest guidelines are saying, and then really carry that over into how do we put that in practice? How does that benefit the patients, not just remind us that we know some stuff?
Another thing that's been a big change is, and it almost feels surprising to say it, is EHRs. So prior to opening, the majority of practices were not on an electronic health record. And so that's changed things in a number of ways, some good, some not so good. One of the main ways from a patient-facing point of view is patient portal.
With everything that comes, 9 things that are great, there's going to be the one that can be a drawback. And some of the more recent changes with patients viewing lab results as soon as they come through, while the access to their information quickly is fantastic, the term essentially normal is usually what comes to mind. They flag labs as out of range and abnormal, and things can seem like they're scary. And all of a sudden, this information's in front of you, you have it, but nobody's responding until tomorrow. And that's probably a hard point to explain to families of essentially normal is really reassuring to us and probably sounds terrifying until they've heard from us. And so I don't love the stress that causes families, but hopefully more times than not, it's reassuring when they see the results and they've come through and can understand things are better than seemed.
What you're saying, I think, is a little bit of an example of a much larger point that over the last 15 years, information's exploded. So
Yeah.
information about your own medical record, meaning like labs and things like that, but also being able to access anything.
Right.
And so that has been hard in a lot of ways on parents. I think there's this naive assumption we all have that getting informed is a good thing, and not appreciating that more information actually, as often as it brings reassurance, and it brings angst.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now parents today are raising children in this era of ubiquitous information. How do you feel like that's been a factor that you've seen play out over the 15 years?
I don't really remember a time in my career where Dr. Google wasn't a thing, where it wasn't an option for families to go on and look up some things. And, the running joke of Google will tell you it's nothing, or maybe you'll die, right? Like you're going to get worst case scenario. And so I do feel like, access to good searches and understanding how to access other documents or maybe medical data instead of just a People news article. That exposure to so much information has made it really hard to weed out to good information. And like you said, the anxiety that comes with that is incredibly difficult. It is hard to unring a bell. When you've read something, you have it in your mind, you think, oh my gosh, this fits perfectly. I bet this is what I'm dealing with or what my child's dealing with. It's hard to navigate not over testing to prove some of those things, and reassuring, and why watching and waiting is a great tactic so many times if red flags aren't present. And I think the more trust we have with our families, the better we're able to communicate why we're not doing some of those things. But I would agree, it feels very stress driven on the family side as they seek information. Do you feel similar?
Yeah, I do. It feels, I feel for families, because the idea, if every parent deep in their heart is saying, is my child okay? And am I doing everything I'm supposed to be doing? The amount of information really makes you question each of those more than feel calm reassurance. And so that has been very palpable in just interacting with families. Just this almost increased fear and insecurity. And I think another sort of branch of that has become almost a DIY health type of thing, that I don't necessarily need this physician anymore, other than just to push the buttons I need pushed.
Yeah.
Because I can research this, and these are the tests I want, and that kind of thing. And so I think it probably has more than two manifestations. One is just this fear and angst, so many more things that are brought into attention to worry about. And the other is sort of I don't need this relationship-based interaction with a physician, trusting their guidance. I really just need them to do what I want them to do.
Yeah.
So very transactional instead of relational, which is obviously very antithetical to the way we operate.
Absolutely.
And the way we're set up. And so those are the two things that come to mind when I think about how the explosion of information has changed.
Yeah. And if you think of a few generations ago, Dr. Sears, there's a book available and everybody's following that. And then Baby Wise was huge, or the Ferber method for sleep. And you have just these few well-known named things that families were largely following. And now there's so many of them that often it feels like I have to commit to one. Or it seems like families have that pressure of feeling like, if I don't pick one of these paths, then I'm doing a disservice to my child by not leaning all in or being the uber parent that I want
the thing
to be.
that I fear that as you say that comes to mind is the first thing I think is not that those people were right on everything, but they at least were credentialed.
Yeah.
Right. And so now this, like the phrase cult of the amateur, now it's sort of a media presence that it really does convey authority emotionally,
Yeah.
even if logically it doesn't. If you just hear something communicated in a compelling way, it's hard not to be affected by it, even if there's no, and when I say credentials, I don't even mean degrees. I mean more just knowledge, wisdom, and expertise, right?
Yeah, something more than an anecdotal version because it went great for that scenario or that person doesn't mean it's going to cross over without some of the large study backing of we see this really helps lots of people instead of coincidence.
So I think the main thing is you just feel this empathy on behalf of patients as far as families because again, I think it's just, is my child okay? Am I doing everything that I should be doing? And there's just a lot of unsettled angst. Why don't we talk about COVID?
Okay.
And so just when you think of, it almost may be the signature event of the last 15 years as it relates to, maybe you could say society, and you probably could say more than 15 years, maybe of the last.
Yeah, there's a
century.
definitive marker in most things in our lives that are pre and post COVID.
Yep.
I think we all have a period of time where it was, we hadn't thought about masks or social distancing or knew of so many scientific terms related to viral spread. And then the post world where things do feel different or so many reaching parts that have touched the rest of our lives.
So what are some of those high level things when you think about how has COVID changed the field of pediatrics?
The world of celebrating perfect attendance feels a little bit far removed now of sending a child sick or going to work sick because you went and you got the attendance had a little bit of a pride to it previously. And now there seems to be a little bit more understanding of that's not serving you or your neighbor if you're spreading illness, but even jobs with the ability to work remotely. And so staff members, when we're sick, that we can swap out and be the person who is home doing virtual calls instead of exposing patients to illness. And even the number of families who comfortably come in here in a mask.
Right.
I can remember early in my career it feeling like you must have the plague. Why is there a mask on? It was really
outside
startling.
Outside of the hospital, we essentially never wore masks, or almost never wore masks. And obviously during COVID, you did so much. But then we all still do when examining certain illnesses and getting close.
Yeah, and for families who see it inconsistently in the office, there is a little bit of leeway on that, on personal discretion of while talking in the room, just while in a little one's face doing an exam. If we're not feeling well consistently throughout the day, having it on. Some families keep masks on the whole time during the rooms. And so there's a variety of it now, but it seems much more accepting of it's kind of everybody's own comfort level where they land on that.
What are other COVID things?
I feel like we've always had some vaccine hesitancy discussions. Both the timeline of how discussions around COVID illness were reported to the public, as well as the rollout of the vaccine. I feel like some of it has increased since that timeline, at least in our world.
It accelerated distrust, warranted or not warranted. And that unfortunately has stuck around.
Yeah.
And whether it relates to, health advice in general, honestly, beyond health and medicine, just science and experts. I keep going broader. It's not just medicine, it's science, not just science.
Yeah.
It's expertise of various types. And and that's it's an unfortunate thing in so many ways, just partly because any relationship without a strong basis of trust is just a pretty precarious place to stand, both ways, actually.
Yeah, and not in our timeline here, because I feel like we've been really happy to answer questions and enjoy, as we would say, we were a little nerdy in the scientific reading side of it and enjoying all the stories that come with where vaccines came from. But there was a period of time where it was like, you don't question the doctor, you do what they say. And we've come so far from that where the questions are great and the discussions can be incredibly helpful at explaining why something's done at a certain time frame or what our recommendation is based on. But there are times where even with that, even with what appeared to be trust, that it's gotten harder to convey that.
Yeah, there's a phrase that in our world of shared decision making that long preceded vaccines. It was sort of kind of a medical ethics phrase that's been around for decades and sort of very needed, right? I mean, kind of the idea that patients should be involved in discussions as it relates to their care. And so that's been around for quite a while and it's been a growing thing. It does have its difficulties in the sense, I mean, an example in our world would be if you have shared decision making around meningococcal B vaccination. And so just playing it out, it would be, okay, so I want you to know this is for meningitis. So what's meningitis? Well, it's inflammation of the meninges, which is a lining of the brain and spinal cord. And so, okay, and there's viral and there's bacterial. We're talking about bacterial, and among bacterial, there's certain bacteria. This one's Neisseria meningitidis. And of that, there's subtype. I mean,
it's long.
It's long, and it's really, and you feel for the patient that, okay, I'm supposed to be sharing in the decision-making on this.
Right.
And, but it's not an authoritarian spirit as much as it is, how do you do that in a way that's clear and fair and engaging and truly shared decision making. And so anyway, that's a cultural thing that again was needed and warranted, but it's challenging. It's not easy.
What else do you notice post-COVID changes for our practice or medicine in general?
Two things that pop into mind. One, it further bifurcated society as it relates to it almost became a time of which camp are you going to be in?
Yeah.
And obviously politics is always a part of the world and a necessary part of the world. But it really hasn't been a part of pediatrics prior to COVID. I mean, obviously advocacy and legislation, and that's politics, but I mean partisanship really wasn't something that I felt like was permeating pediatric care, and it clearly does now.
Yeah.
So that would be one. And then I think the other thing that probably comes to mind would be mental health that in reality was escalating and was not in a good spot pre-COVID. So, whether it's most of, I think, good data would trace it back to cell phone and
smartphone and social media.
That's right.
And immediate
but COVID,
access.
Seemed to worsen that.
Yeah, the isolation that was necessary in a lot of ways happened at a really tough time developmentally for a lot of kids. And whether that was, kindergarten and learning to follow the steps of being in school and leave their families, or, later elementary school, navigating friend groups or figuring out what your role in that group is like. Sports teams, kids who lived for their sports and were so active and didn't have that outlet anymore. It just became so many of their coping strategies for handling all the things that come their way, all of a sudden had to be paused or changed. And you combine that with families who were feeling it and the adults in the room not knowing how to handle it themselves, but also trying to work from home, still pay bills and navigate everything fear-based that came with that. At a time while the kids were needing this, it just is unlike anything we've seen happen.
I think in a positive way, I think one of the things delighted in with us in COVID was something we referred to earlier, nimble. That, I mean, we've always, since the day we opened, we've had a standing meeting at 8 a.m., everybody present, all hands meeting. And those ones during COVID, it was like, let's make sure we're all on the same page about this. changing recommendation came out. How are we communicating? How are we handling these scenarios? And so the nimbleness of us as a practice being, I think there were a lot of things, being small, having what we refer to as sort of a flat org chart. We take input from everyone. We communicate pretty openly and freely, not institutionally bound and by not having to run things by committees and all that kind of stuff. I think that was actually a fun part of COVID, to see an organization, to see a group of people really work in a collaborative way and a very nimble way.
The other thing that comes to mind for me along those lines is food allergies. And in the span of my career, the things I think of as notably different than I learned in school, being one of the areas we, as a collective, we in medicine have less knowledge on at this point and are still evolving so much on, is how vastly that's changed in our recommendations of not late introduction, but switching to early introduction, and some of the oral challenges and how much we're testing. Can you think of any other big areas that have changed?
I don't think anything as dramatic as that. I mean, that was one that it was such a, okay, what we were with our understanding we had and telling people to do it in a delayed sense, that seems to have been totally wrong.
We seem to have made things worse.
Right. Immune system, which is a little bit of a common thread of those things, is there's so many aspects that we are just still in the infant stages of understanding.
Yeah, and infectious disease as a grouping. I mean, COVID is obviously highlighted. In my career, we had swine flu when that new strain, maybe a new variant, not quite as distinct as COVID. And with the new rollout of a vaccine at that time, there were certainly some similar threads within the infectious realm of that.
RSV, I feel like, has been one of the highlights, at least of the last 5 years. RSV sort of being kind of just a terror of parenting young children, of pediatrics, of hospitals, and the remarkable success of the RSV immunoglobulin shot. I mean, we call it a vaccine, even though it's not a vaccine, but
which has been pretty universal in the U.S. 2 to 3 seasons we're at now. My career too spans kind of rotatext timeline, and so the rollout of protecting against rotavirus and the number of hospital admissions for dehydration that have been able to be prevented since rolling that out. There are some really phenomenal things career-wise, but it's fun to watch Beyfortus and the RSV vaccine happen now.
What about mental health? I mean, that would be at the very, very top of the list of things that have changed in the last 15 years.
I feel like outside of some of the school-related attention concerns that we've seen throughout our time in the last 15 years, I don't remember anywhere near the degree of anxiety, depression, mental health, consult visits that we see now being present, even a fraction. Certainly, we've always done toddler behavior, and I think some of that crosses over in supporting families' mental health and how that crosses into how do we respond and parent intentionally, and then trying to navigate that with a school-age child or teenager with access to a phone and constant input of comparison, seeing social media posts of people having fun or what editing of things looks like for personal appearance, or feeling left out if they're not included in something, has just been kind of a devastating toll on tweens, teens, a lot of our patients.
You know, we used to talk about there weren't enough mental health providers, and that was all pre this explosion of mental health issues. And so it's not even close now as far as having mental health specialists to care for the patients that need it. And so what that's done is it's become a primary care issue.
In treatment, but also in universal screening, of not assuming everyone's going to comfortably speak up on that, but our teenagers and families kind of should understand or recognize that we are requesting, teens to talk to us, and gauge some of that information and do some more official screening tools to see who's suffering silently, who's, falling through the cracks of not voicing it or being noticed that
Yeah, we
they're
get asked a lot
struggling.
of times because pediatrics is a lot of screenings. We do vision screening, we do hearing screening, we do depression screening, all these different screening tests. And we'll get asked a lot of times, usually it's related to vision and hearing, do you think I should do it? I really don't have any concerns. And I always say that's exactly when you do a screening test,
Yeah.
when you don't necessarily have concerns. And we had a time, and you'll probably remember even the patients that I'm referring to, early on, I feel like it was 1 to 2 years into the practice, so more than a decade ago, we had an extremely difficult eating disorder, a really difficult anxiety, depression adolescent, and then an extremely overweight teenager. And I remember thinking, it is so difficult to make significant headway in any of these cases. But we'll try. But if there is anything that could have been done in those cases 8 to 10 years ago, we need to figure that out and start doing that with our young patients. And we really did. And so much of the discussions that we have as it relates to discussions around food with toddlers, discussions around emotional intelligence in a young child and emotional vocabulary, snacks and no juices. I mean, all these type things in a lot of ways are the really, really upstream things trying to prevent these cases that are really hard to treat. In the midst of all changes, what do you feel like hasn't changed at all?
The people, I think both the staff and our patients are just so incredible. It's been so fun to, like I said about school, watch these kids get colds, but get better, watch them grow up, see the features you can remember them as a baby or the photos of them as an infant in the chart that then when they're here as a teenager, it's hard to believe who's taller than me or how much they've changed. The stories of times they've been in the building and silly or just things you hear about connections of Facebook friends and staying in contact with people I only know through here or seeing them out to dinner and them saying hello.
Right.
That trust they put in us and kind of letting us help in that time frame when they're new parents is just so fun in the community to see and witness. And our staff, as much as we've grown and we had this super protective, great bubble of our core original staff, we've just managed to always find the right people to join each part of the team to help us grow or to fill the need that's happening at that time. And that's just so unique. I don't think everyone can say that. When patients tell us, I love this place, I love this practice, it's so fun to be able to say, I love it here. I know I'm partial to it. I've been here 15 years. I'll be here 15 more. I get it. I know not everyone goes to work saying that. And I think that's been universal the whole time.
Yeah. We will sometimes refer to the practice sort of like your own child in the sense that if you look at a picture of your 3-year-old child and then you look at a picture of your 18-year-old child, there's some core aspects that are still there. And then there's some more mature, hopefully, more mature aspects.
Yes.
And I think of that around here. And when I think of, there's a maturation in the things we're able to provide and the amount of people we're able to serve and things like that. But those core aspects that I think are there and will, like DNA, will never go away. We talk about our core values being excellent pediatric care in a setting that's pleasant, in a context that's relational. And it's probably even come out in the previous discussions tonight that for us, excellent pediatric care, that means it's conservative, it's evidence-based. That hasn't changed. Now as the evidence has evolved or, as it relates to various things, ear infections, food allergies, infectious diseases, pleasant experience. I mean, there's a lot, again, not perfect, but we try to, as far as communicate well and be on time and greet people warmly. And then relational, we see pediatrics as by necessity in the context of a relationship. I think some people don't. Again, it may just be where I need my kid's ear looked at and I need a strep test. And that's just not us.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, different people can have different desires, but that's not how we view pediatrics. And so I think those those core aspects, not in any way that's perfect, but as far as holding on to them.
Yeah, driving force, that really is what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
I would agree. That's been incredibly consistent and always apparent that that's what we're striving for.
We talk about it all the time, and it's sort of our guiding lights.
Do you think of anything when you were planning this, when you were rolling out the office? Can you think of anything now that's missing that you're ready to put in place?
I mean, a lot of the dream was that families would be able to get excellent care in a setting that was small and intimate. And then that employees could feel valued and contributing to the overall mission, no matter what your role is. And then maybe the third thing I would say is, and this is more of a personal bias, I've always wanted it to be a learning environment. And so that last aspect has been maybe different than I would have thought.
Okay.
A lot of the way it's been a learning environment, we have gap year students, and they bring such an energy and being able to teach and somehow shape them before they go on to their journey.
And they are just so ravenous for information.
Right.
They learn so willingly and are so invested in what we're offering, and that's hard not to get excited by.
I didn't have it in like any sort of vision before, but I think we have to keep leaning into is how do we keep evolving in the way we communicate? I mean, this podcast is an example of that, but we've talked before that maybe one of the post-COVID legacies, unfortunate legacies, is that which used to be a given is no longer a given, that you, just because you might indeed be trustworthy, that doesn't necessarily mean you will be trusted. And so there's more work that has to be done now than it used to have to be done, that to establish trust, because trustworthy may be sort of an inherent quality of a place.
Yeah.
And trusted is a relationship between those two entities coming together.
That takes time and takes, yeah.
It takes communication, and it takes, listening and asking questions. And so because that's gotten harder, and because, the world communicates in different ways, I feel like that's probably something that I think has to be different about us looking forward. How do we be more intentional about the ways we establish trust? Being on time is a big deal to me.
Yeah.
It still drives me crazy that healthcare gets away with chronically running so late and being. I feel like there's so many aspects of healthcare that really are. I mean, the word is dehumanizing, and so to try to have a place where you counter that, that's always been, quote, part of the dream.
I don't know how many patients realize how much it stresses us.
Yeah.
Like I do have this sentiment when I go in a room sometimes of thank you for waiting. Like
Right.
I know it's a choice. I know it's hard to entertain a kid in that room. And it is so stressful to make sure we're relational and excellent. And sometimes that creeps over on time. That is so stressful, I think, to all of us. And trying to not make it apparent and seem chaotic and still give great time to the next patient. But I think it helps to say it for people to understand we don't want that to be the norm. We
Right.
don't like that part.
You do hope that when they're in one time and have, hey, actually I have another question, and that you give them the time and realize that will potentially make you later on the subsequent visits, that will translate into grace when they're the one waiting, But I really do think our team does a great job of trying to make the experience pleasant. And the point is never, we say it's not efficiency. That's not the
Right.
point. The point is great care, but efficiency is sort of a necessary part of that. And so that's been a fun part. I mean, just to try to figure out, how do you take a system, meaning healthcare, that's complicated, and not necessarily conducive to efficiency, and try to figure out ways to make it so.
Do you have a favorite room in the office?
Probably the infant room.
Same.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where some of the most fun interactions are. So, I mean, this room where the people tend to be for their first visit. I think the joy that you get to just share. I mean, my daughter will sometimes say, "You are so lucky you get to play with babies all day long." And if I didn't that day remember that, I think, you know what, you're right.
I do frequently remind my girls who I keep encouraging to do something pediatric. Like, can you imagine doing that for an adult when you can do it for a kid? Like that sentiment is part of my day every time I'm in here. It is such a fun room with the coziness of the chairs, the decor, the big window, everything you and Adair set this office to be with the feels like a home really shows in that room. And then that time frame, that precious first visit when everything is starting and we're establishing that trust and coming with them on the next steps.
Yeah, I
It's
don't want
pretty
to be
special.
overly dramatic about it, but this idea of a first encounter where someone is figuratively saying, "Will you come walk alongside us as we care for this precious thing that just happened to us?"
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty hard to, maybe other professional fields have something that they feel like is similar.
Yeah. Kind of
Uh,
equates to that.
I feel like that would be hard to equal that.
Any outside of newborn visit, do you have a favorite well check age?
5 for some reason is fun. I think 5-year-olds are fun and just say fun things. They're verbal enough to express whatever they're thinking, and they're not inhibited to worry about how this is going to come across, type of thing. And so I think some of the most fun little back and forth conversations for me are 5. Maybe that says something about my own maturity level. What about you?
I would say 4-month-olds. I love getting to hold a baby while parents ask questions. They're making notes in their phone and getting that hands-on time. They are still not afraid of a stranger being in their space, and the cooing and the interactions and just all their facial expressions, seeing a personality develop, having some of those. I'll say sometimes to families, they're not just a meatloaf. They have something to offer. I just adore that visit.
Yeah, they seem kind of like light up when you walk in the room.
Yeah.
As opposed
Easy to impress.
the,
Maybe that says
2-year-old.
something about my
Right.
personality.
If someone had asked me in medical school, do you think you'll do pediatrics? I would have said no. And then once I got into pediatrics, if they would have said, do you think you'll do general pediatrics? I would have said no. Specialty, and had already applied for those. And then things happened with family. And then once I was in general pediatrics, if someone had said, do you ever want to own your own practice? I said no. And so it's always interesting to me how we've landed where we've landed. And I think professionally, just way better than I ever could have imagined. And if someone said why, it's 2 things come to mind. One, you alluded to, it's the families are so much fun to interact with. And then the second would be this constant challenge and freedom of tweak and iterate and try and experiment of a small, nimble office where, hey, healthcare has so many ways to improve. Let's see if we can figure out a way to make this a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so kind of our little sandbox has been fun, and to be able to do it alongside families that are just such a joy to care for. Yeah, it's been so much better than I ever would imagine.
Yeah. And like you said, the 3-year-old that you want to flourish, but you don't want to plan for them and pave their path specifically as a teenager. The office is kind of that way. We want it to be great, but we could not have predicted where it's come or where it's going.
No, that's such a good way to put it, because not having an agenda for my child as far as you will turn out this way.
Right.
But I do want you to flourish, and I want you to be the absolute best version of yourself that you can be. And so some of that just requires a lot of open-handedness about, hey, let's try to make it healthy and then see where it goes.
Yeah. And keeping those core things, the things that are most crucial to where you want to pass on those values to your kids, the same here.
Yeah, if somebody asks, and people do ask, hey, where do you want the practice to be 10 years? I was like, I don't think like that.
Right.
I want it to be healthy. I want it to be providing excellent pediatric care. I want the experience to be pleasant, and I want there to be a lot of relationships. So I mean, I don't have any sort of grand developed visions about what it would be at 15 years nor what it'll be at 25, but just continuing to do those things and have just a fun team that you get to do it with. Adair and I will talk about how if someone ever feels like parenting, if I could just get past this problem, we'll say that is the wrong view of parenting. Parenting is almost nothing but solving problems.
Right.
And if you can find someone you love to solve problems with and become better collectively at solving problems, you hit jackpot. And I think about that around here. Business is a series of days of solving problems, and that will never go away. But if you can find a group of people you love solving problems with who are pretty good at solving problems together.
Yeah. And just as devoted to it and committed
That's right.
to where it's heading or what you're doing.
And you've hit jackpot professionally. And I feel like at least standing here at year 15, that's where we are.
We've done pretty well with that.
Well, thanks for all your role in that.
Thanks. I take a little bit of ownership without the heavy lifting of really having it. I have this kind of personal obligation to feel like this place is part mine and the success of it is really important to me. And so hopefully in 15 years, I keep seeing if one of my girls wants to follow this path and end up here. And so I think phase 2 of our employees, kids being on the wall and then working here. We've had Anna so far. Have we had any other? I mean, our kids come and help if patients have been in. You certainly see some of our kids on summer breaks and school breaks, cleaning the rooms and helping out around here. But someday really on staff will be incredible.
Yeah, and kind of see you here at year 25.
Yeah, I mean, we will be a little grayer. Definitely older.
Apparently, you can do stuff about that.
Yeah, I do stuff about that. I'm going to keep that up. Yeah. Hopefully wiser, hopefully aware of some of the things we need the next generation to pick up and do the heavy lifting on.
Yeah, who knows what it'll look like. Yeah, been fun. Thank you.
Thank you.